Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Gretchen, and today I'm back with another International Booker Longlist review, and today's pick is The Silver Bone by Andrey Kurkov, and this is translated from the Russian by Boris Dralyuk. Now, this book is interesting for a few reasons, and we'll talk about those before we get into the review. First of all, this is a part of a series, and this is the first in the series, and there are apparently 2 additional books in the series that have already been written, but they have yet to be translated. The second thing that's interesting is that this is the second year in a row that Andrey Kurkov has been longlisted for the International Booker. He was longlisted last year for Jimi Hendrix Live in Lviv, and then now with The Silver Bone, knowing that there are 2 additional books out that have already been written that just need to be translated, I'm wondering if we can expect to see him on the long list for the International Booker in the future as those other books are released. He's a darling of the International Booker. The judges seem to love him and they really like his books. I'm a little on the fence about his writing, and if I had to guess, my guess is that why he gets so much recognition for the books is not necessarily completely due to his writing, but possibly due to the translation that Boris Dralyuk is providing. Russian is a very difficult language to translate. There's a lot of different nuances to the language, and this book is also set in the early 1920s, or actually no, it's 1919 is where this is set. And with that, I think that was an additional layer of challenge for the translator, because it's not necessarily modern language that's being translated. And when I think of reading Russian translated works, I am always thinking of, you know, your Dostoevsky, your Tolstoy, and although I love those books or those authors' writing, their books can be quite challenging because there is a lot of repetition with names. There's a lot of names for the same people that sound very similar, and I know that that can be a challenge. And I think that Boris Dralyuk did a really good job. I never got lost in the translation with this book. It was never anything where I was struggling with. It was very upfront. Although it wasn't lyrical, it wasn't flowery, it was exactly what I wanted, and it didn't give me any more than it should have. And I really appreciated the book for that. Now, this book follows our main character. His name is Samson, and Samson is initially, right off the bat with the story, he is in a scenario where he just witnessed his father's death. His father had his skull crushed by a saber, and in the process, Samson also ended up having his ear sliced off. So he lost his ear, and he wraps up his ear, and he knows that he can't save his father, so he takes his ear and he seeks out a doctor to see if he can get help with his ear. Now, his doctor that he finds is actually an ophthalmologist, and I will say that there were several very humorous parts to this book. Another thing that this book had going for it was that it was funny at times, and he finds this ophthalmologist, and he obviously can't do anything for Samson's ear. So Samson takes his ear and he kind of wraps it up, he puts it in a box, and he keeps it. And it turns out that this ear now has magical properties where wherever the ear is, Samson can hear what is going on around it. So that comes into play a little bit later. So the other thing to keep in mind about this book is it's set in 1919 in Kiev, and this is post-World War I, and the government and Ukraine is in a very weird spot at the time politically. There is all of this power struggle on who is going to be ruling that area, and this book forced me to learn a lot on my own about the history of the Ukraine, and that was one thing that I did learn, was how often during the time that the book was set, how often power was shifting from faction to different factions. So that was very interesting about the book, and having all of that political and government strife for power going on led to a very interesting read, and it also put Samson and the characters in the book in very unique situations. So one of the things that happens shortly after the beginning, when he loses his ear, is he lives in this kind of flat or this open room, not a whole lot of space, but he does have a place to live, and there are two Red Army soldiers that kind of commandeer his home, and they take up residence in it. And one day, while these two Red Army soldiers are alone, but Samson's ear is close to them, Samson hears them coming up with a plan and kind of talking about some shady stuff. Now, Samson is kind of torn. He doesn't know what to do about the information that he's just heard, but he ultimately decides that he is going to report it to the police. So Samson goes to the police to report these two soldiers, and by the time he leaves the police department, and this just goes to show how unstable things were at the time, he ends up walking out of the police department as their new detective. He has no experience as a detective. He has a background in engineering, and now all of a sudden he is a detective, and he is given his first case. And his first case involves, there are two murders that happened, and the one piece of evidence is a silver bone, and the other piece of evidence is this suit that's made out of some strange or unique material, and it's also a suit that is made for a body type that has very odd or unusual dimensions. So basically, that is the start of the mystery, and I won't get into too much of what happens because it is a mystery, and it's very hard to not give too much away when you're talking about a mystery. Now, this book, I enjoyed it for the most part. There were definitely things about it that I wish were done better. First of all, the mystery didn't really start until much later in the book. Now, I understand why that had to happen. With this being the start of a series, you know, we needed to get that character development. We needed to kind of get the world building, and I understand. But for somebody that wants to read a mystery and for it not to really pick up until 2/3 into the book, that kind of was disappointing. The one thing I will say that I really enjoyed about the book was, and I think I mentioned this a little earlier, was that this book forced me to look into a lot of history and do a lot of research on my own about what was happening in the Ukraine at that time. And that part was really interesting, and I did really enjoy learning about that. Now, I will say the mystery at the end, it really wasn't too thrilling. It really wasn't too satisfying for me, but I will say we did have a little bit of a cliffhanger, so that could prepare us for the other books to come. And I will say that I will potentially continue the series. Obviously, if they're nominated or longlisted for the International Booker when they're released, of course I will read them. But I think it's a safe series. It's nothing that's gonna blow your mind, but it was entertaining enough. It was funny at times. It had a lot of dark humor and dark wit, which I always appreciate. And it was an easy enough read. It wasn't a mystery that was so complicated that you needed your little murder board to figure everything out. It was pretty upfront. It was pretty straightforward, and I think that it was probably one of the easiest reads I've had so far for the International Booker. And although it wasn't my favorite, I landed on a 3.5, and I definitely am feeling a little better about the books. Obviously, this did not make the short list, but after reading a couple books where I was like very underwhelmed, this was a nice, safe pick, and I'm glad that I read it. So yeah, I'm curious to see, have any of you guys read this one? Did you guys read the book he was nominated or longlisted for last year? Do you have any plans on continuing the series if they're translated into English? And yeah, I think, like I said, I'm feeling much better about the International Booker, especially now that I see the short list, and I know that some of the books I did not get on very well with didn't make the cut. So I'm hopeful that the ones that are coming that I still have yet to read are much better. So I'm looking forward to getting to those, and until we read again, bye.